The following presentation was recorded live in Cincinnati, Ohio for CALLERLAB's 25th Annual Convention. This is tape 24, Mental Image.
Welcome everybody here for this session on the Introduction to Mental Image Calling. My name is Don Beck. I'm moderator for the session, and my panelists are yours truly. So this is a talk I've given many times over the last 15 or 20 years, and have never had the opportunity to give it at a CALLERLAB. Well, I take that back. Last year I did at a closed session to the caller coaches, and I guess they enjoyed it enough so they thought that the rest of the world should see it. One of the reasons I've been hesitant to suggest doing it here is because a group this size, I may have trouble seeing what's going on up here, but we'll do the best we can. My apologies to those people that are just listening to the tape. I was not aware this was going to be taped, but this is a very visual presentation. And the tapes are audio tapes, but let's go with what we can on that anyway. Anyway, as we know, I hope, there are many forms of choreographic management. Just to outline them very briefly, the very basic version is reading. And you read the choreography, and it starts from a square set and ends with an element left your corner, promenade home, or whatever type. And then there are things like memorizing, which is reading off the inside of your eyelids. Zeros and equivalents, or modules, which when I started giving this talk, I used to say most people use that. Then there's sight calling, which affords lots more flexibility but has certain drawbacks. And I'd say now probably the majority of people use sight calling. How many of you are sight callers? How many of you primarily use modules? I'm right that we have gone to sight calling quite a bit. There's another method that falls in a logical progression as I was going from reading through sight calling, falls in between modules and sight calling, called mental image choreography. Why it falls in between: mental image calling allows much more versatility and ad-lib calling and flexibility and non-memorized stuff than modules, zeros, and equivalents, but less than sight calling. It has advantages, as modules have advantages over sight calling. Sight calling, some of the disadvantages are you have to memorize who started with whom. The square that you're counting on, or the squares that you're counting on, have to not make a mistake, or else you can't resolve if they're incorrect. Or you can resolve their square, not the other 23. Or are we down to 7 these days? Anyway. And mental image calling allows sort of a compromise between the two. Now, mental image calling means a lot of things to a lot of people. One person pointed out, I was speaking to a few days ago here, and he requested I address the differences between mental image systems, and he's not here. That there's several different mental image systems that people use, have developed and worked with. There's the windmill system that Stan Burdick has used and published and talked about. There's a system. Well, the original thing that I read was a book by Jay King, Fundamentals of Calling, and that's what I started to learn on. And where things didn't quite make sense to me, I sort of stretched the theories a little till they did make sense, and pushed the envelope to the point where most people that knew Jay's system said that mine was fairly original to me by that point. Many of you may not be familiar with Jay's work, but are with Gene Trimmer's work. Gene Trimmer's book is Jay King's book. He bought the rights to it after Jay passed away from Jay's widow, and made some minor changes to it, from what I understand, to using more current choreography, but still the same basic system. The system that I'm going to describe now is the one that I use, that I've derived. Is that breathing noises for me, or something scraping? Because I want to breathing. I take a clue. I will stop breathing. Let's turn the volume down and see if that works. Once every 20 minutes, whether I need it or not. Yeah, thanks. One of the things that typically people think about with mental image is that a caller has to be able to see a square of 8 dancers in their head and figure out how all that's happening, and just do sight calling in your head and then resolve those 8 dancers that haven't made any mistake because you have complete control over them. And most people say, I don't think I could do that. What scares me is I think there are a few that can. I can't. There's no way that I can do that with 8 dancers. Of course, you only need 4. If you're a sight caller, you know there are only 4 dancers and the rest will fall into place with mental image, or with mirror image, symmetry. I can't do that either. Some people try to call to 1 and keep track of that person's corner and can make things happen. I can't even keep track of 2. I managed to keep track of just 1, and that seems to work with a few other rules that I will show you. My object here today is not to teach you how to do mental image calling, because it's not easy to learn. It takes a long time, and they haven't allotted us that much time. What I'm trying to do is convince you that a system exists, show you the basic principles of it, and make it such that if you are ever interested in going on to taking the time to learn it, this will help you make your decision whether you want to invest the time. As I say, it's not easy to learn. The beauty of it is, once you've learned it, it is easy to use. And it does generalize into something that's quite fascinating. The other thing is, those of you that are sight callers already, you're going to have a harder time learning it than the non-caller, because the person that doesn't have any system is groping for anything. The sight caller is going to fall back on something they know and can use. But most sight callers I've showed the system to have, one, been fascinated by it, that there are some rules, not mathematical, physical rules, that do govern and explain a lot of what we do. And 2, there are some very strong advantages to knowing the system for a sight caller to be able to fall back on. And I'll get into those real soon. The first thing I want to do is just prove to you that a system works, if I can. This is the ad-lib part that I get nervous about. First of all, I want to introduce you to my dancers up here. Please note that these are not arrows, but there are arms. This is a squared set, so this number 1 man is not facing down, but facing into the square. Note that by looking at arms, if we have an ocean wave, you can actually see kind of a wavy setup here, and it helps visualize what's going on. Note that these couples in particular, the men are the ones with the V's and the women are the U's. If they're holding hands, they're normal couples. If they're not holding hands, they're half-sashayed couples. It's just a little recognition tool to help identify what's going on quickly. These guys sometimes dance really well and sometimes don't. Anyway, you probably are aware that if I, pardon the A1 call, do a heads pair off, we're in a 0 box, box 1-4, whatever you have. Everybody facing corners, sides are next to partners, heads are back to back with partners. I could do a successful Alaman left promenade home over there. All comfortable with that? Whew. Okay. We're going to try and get there. What I'm going to do with mental image calling here in this quick demo is hide the identities of these callers, of these dancers, by flipping them over. We still see arms. I will keep track of this one here, the one active person. How often will I trip over these chords? That may minimize it slightly, and a little bit more. I'm going to run these guys through a sequence, and when I've decided it's probably enough for the demonstration, I'm going to resolve them. You guys may, and I thought about this for a long time, you guys may say, well, he's really memorized that sequence or something. In order to convince the world that I haven't memorized the sequence, you guys are going to create it for me. I'm going to have each of you give me a call until I decide it's time to resolve. There's some ground rules I'm going to lay. One is, I mentioned it is not as versatile as sight calling. It's very versatile, but not as versatile as sight calling. I can follow a lot of stuff, but not everything by a long shot. And so I want you guys to help me prove it works, not try and trick me. And if you're calling something beyond what I think is valuable for the talk, I will say tilt and look for a more basic call. You are welcome to call something beyond head square through do-si-do, swing through men run. Anyway, you know, you can call a heads forward and back first. That's fine. Anyway, could I have a call? Sides lead left. Okay. Another. By the way, rather than passing the mic along, let me make sure I repeat it for the tape. It was sides lead left. Touch a quarter. Notice their ocean waves. Chuck, excuse me, center's trade. For the time being, I'm going to call tilt on that. You want another one? Scoot back. In some cases here, I'll be dancing the calls as shortcuts, so apologize if we don't go into the middle and do this. Split circulate. Thank you, Wayne. Now I'm confused again. Okay. Next, walk and dodge. Partner trade. You all following where we all are now? We can. It's poor flow, and it's also, I'm going to call tilt. I don't feel like working that hard right now. Oh, they're facing in. These are arms. Normal couples. Wheel and deal. I don't want to do one of those either. In fact, why don't I just resolve from here, if that's okay with you. Let's see we just did a men run. So reverse flutter would reasonably flow okay. Which is the same as the ladies' chain. And did somebody say something? No. Okay. And for a get out, I'm going to use star through to an 8-chain through setup and pass through. And supposedly, if all theory works right, these guys are facing corners, these are next to corners, and everybody's ready to do in sequence. And this is the moment of truth, and I always get nervous when I do this because it doesn't always work. Well, let's put it this way. It worked every time except when I did it for the caller coaches last year. Anyway, number one man's corner should be the number 4 woman. Should be back-to-back with his own partner, number 1 woman. He should be back-to-back with the number 4 man. And this should be the number 3 couple and the number 2 couple. Whew. Okay. At this point, first of all, thank you guys for creating a sequence for me. Are there any questions at this point? You just took my punchline. I did this talk in Oklahoma a number of years ago, and at that point I asked, how'd you do it? And one guy in the back of the room, I said, any questions? And he said, yeah, how'd you do that? That's what we're going to spend the next hour doing. Well, just the active one that was showing. Yeah, actually, somehow it turned out easier. I was keeping track of this one, but that's neither here nor there. So let me talk just a slight bit more, and then let me tell you the key, how I did it, because that's what we're here to do, is to show you how to do this, but in a manner that's probably too quick for you to totally remember. The handouts will be a review of some of the basics of what we've done, and there are other ways to learn it in more detail and step by step if you want. Guess what? I kicked the amplifier back here. Okay, some of the reasons why you would want to do this, why this helps. If I go into a group calling a festival, everybody's in club costume, everybody's wearing yellow. Or it's Valentine's Day and everybody's wearing red. It's not so easy to sight call, matching the red with the red and the red with the red and the red with the red and the yellow. Yeah. This, especially on the first tip till I start to remember faces and all this other stuff. This gives me something to back out, to fall back on if I can't memorize who started with whom. And for me, sight calling, the hardest part when I got started, and still, is memorizing who started with whom. So this gives me an out when I'm in trouble and I can't do that. This gives me something that when I'm doing singing calls, and I want to ad-lib the choreography on singing calls, and I don't want to have to memorize a new partner and a new corner each time through the sequence, I can use mental image calling on that. And I can ad-lib my singing calls without having to worry about memorizing new people. In addition, the type of choreography that you normally use on a singing call is basic enough so that you have much more capabilities here than you need for the fairly fundamental choreography you have in a singing call. If you want to practice calling while you're in your car and keep practicing the sequences, and just, while you're driving along, listening to your square dance review tapes or something, your singing call review tapes, want to practice then, and want to have not just say strange calls, but want to get a feel for what's going on. This is another way you can do it. You don't need real people to practice the choreographic end of this. And as you'll see later, what we'll talk about later, it'll also help with an understanding of when you can use technical zeros and when you can't, how to get people when they're in and out of sequence, telling that very easily. It'll help you if you're just learning sight calling. It really helps on getting a grasp of some fairly easy resolves by knowing the basics of what are going on. It's a real good fundamental understanding of what's going on. And another advantage or two that I've realized to add to the list in the last couple of years of doing this, in lieu of what's happening at CALLERLAB these days, the majority of what you do typically in this is using choreography that uses standard formations. Once you go out of these standard formations and arrangements, then you seem to have more difficulty following it with this. But it gives you a way to keep control of standard formations. It gives you a way of controlling the difficulty of your dance and the difficulty of the choreography. And when you're having troubles keeping a floor dancing because you keep calling stuff that's too hard for them, if you resort to mental image calling, it tends to pull it into focus a little more and makes that a little easier. Anyway, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of how this thing works. What I'm going to do, well, let me tell you first of all, let me flip all these guys over, including the number one man. And I will probably be using the number one man as the active man I'm following most of the time, but really any of the 8 dancers will work. But the first thing you've got to do is you've got to be able to follow mentally the formation, the whole formation of the square. But you have to do that whether you're sight calling or module calling or anything. I mean, if I call something in sight, I've got to know if that thing's going to end in lines or waves or what have you, so that I know what my next call can be before they get there, just to keep the timing good. Let's, why don't you give me a call? Heads or sides? Do you care? Okay. I'm going to do the heads. Okay, after heads square through 4, what's the basic formation going to be? 8 chain through. Okay. I don't care whether it's a box 1-4 or what kind of a box or what have you. It's basically an 8 chain through. I'm talking formation. Actually talking formation arrangement. We're keeping track of the normal couples too. Another call. Touch a quarter. What's my formation after that? Waves. Okay. Happen to be number 1 waves. Men facing and women facing out. Another call. Centers trade. I still have waves. Explode the wave. What's my formation going to be after that? Lines facing out. Okay, anyway, we understand that. We can all follow the formation fairly easily. Let's go back to square set and not waste time with it. Not that it's a waste of time. One of the things these dancers do quite poorly is square your set. It seems to take them forever. I don't know. And if I were on the other end of the table, it'd even take them longer. Okay, let's flip over the identities of them again. Did I get them home? Yes. I feel like somebody that's got a couple of, 3 walnut shells up here and a pea underneath as I keep sliding these around. This is not black magic. Well, yes, it is. Okay, the next thing that I have to do is keep track of one dancer, we're going to call it the active dancer, within these formations. This is pushing your mental capacities, but you find that just about all sight callers probably do this anyway as they're calling. They really are dancing one position in their minds. So it's not really a lot of additional baggage. So, second row here. Give me a call. Heads lead right. Heads lead right. Where are we going to end? Where's my active man going to be? Yeah, I'll add that. But it's a separate call. Where was that? He's going to be here facing that way. Okay. The next call he gave us, circle to a line. Where is he going to? Okay, we're going to have lines facing in, normal couples. He's going to be on the end of the line. And I don't care if they're symmetric or not. I can't remember which way they're supposed to go. Another call. Touch a quarter. What's the formation I'm going to have? Where's my active man going to be? He's going to be right over here. Okay, etc. So you can see there's not too much additional trouble following this guy. And in addition, it was easier because you were actually seeing where he was and you could sort of get a little bit of feedback along the way. I do this when I have real dancers. I focus on one particular active dancer and he helps me see what's happening. And if his square happens to make a mistake and he was on the far end of a wave, I'll look at another square and find the guy that's on the far end of the wave and have him help me. If his square had made a mistake before, I don't care. If they're right in the right formation and he's still on the end, he can still help me. You know, when I resolve eventually mentally, his square will be wrong because they made a mistake. But the others will, and he's helped me. And in fact, I can watch them for 3 calls and then switch to another square for 3 more calls and another. And that way I'm not just counting on my key square like a sight caller and looking up and seeing the rest of the floor sort of broke down 17 calls ago. I can constantly look around the whole floor, still get them to help me, etc. So let's go back and square sets. And now get into the real meat of this thing here. Come on, guys. We're all squared. If, by the way, I start squaring these up and start flipping them over and have accidentally gotten somebody in the wrong place, just let me know. I'm sure you would have anyway. Okay. What I'm going to do now, we're going to start with the first steps of this. What I'm going to do is lay 500,000 million restrictions on what we can do. And then I will lift them one at a time. And I won't lift all 500 million, but I'll lift as many as we have time for in the hour and a quarter that we have to play with. Half an hour of which is gone already. If you will turn to your handouts to the front side of the last sheet. No, I don't. And that's a problem. I do have large lists up here that I could hang up, but they're not complete, and you probably wouldn't see them from the back anyway. If you can, just share with somebody that does. I think we're only short by about 3 at this point. But you'll see, you should be at the page. This is list of X's and O's and cross-the-center type calls. And in the upper left-hand corner of it, I'm on the wrong page, it should say O-type calls. Don't turn to the one that says X-type calls. Turn to the one that says O-type calls. And it's broken down into basic, mainstream, plus A1 and A2. But I think for the sake of our demo in here, and we can use any of these calls, but for the sake of the demo, why don't we stick to the basic, mainstream, and basic, mainstream. Plus, if you really must. I won't complain if you slip, but let's basically stick to basic and mainstream. So the first restriction we're going to put on is, tell you what, back off. Forget that for just a moment. I forgot one step here that might make this interesting. We know, as I said before, if we do a heads pair off, we can do an Alaman left. Before you saw the people, this time you're not. Basically, I have an 8-chain through formation, normal couples, and this active man standing on this spot on the floor. The first restriction that I'm going to have him back out again. The first restriction I'm going to do is lay on you is just having the head couples dancing in the center and eventually moving the active man to this spot. And we're going to see what happens. Somebody give me a call. Fan the top. Another call. Swing through. Now let's do a recycle. Okay, just for expedience time, to get an 8-chain through setup, normal couples, and this guy on the spot, centers U-turn back. That'll get us there. What do we know about this situation? Can we do an Alaman left or can't we? Here's what we know. We know that we want this to be the number 4 couple, and they better be, because we didn't do anything with them. Hallelujah. We want them to be the number 2 couple, and they better be, because we didn't do anything with them. We want this to be the number 3 man. He's the only man not left. Gotta be. We want this to be the number 1 woman. She may be, she may not. She might be the number 3. We don't know at this point. And I really wasn't paying attention, so I don't know. It's the wrong one. So it's a 50-50 chance that we have the right one. And as most of you know, when there's a 50-50 chance that things are correct, there's a 70-30 chance that they're wrong. Let's go back and square a set. So we can't gamble on that. We could follow either the number 1 or number 3 woman, but we can't. That's what I said. One of the ground rules is we only follow one active person. So here's the next ground rule that's going to make it work. That list I told you about a moment ago. O-type calls, basic and mainstream. If we use only calls from that list and do what we just did, the women will automatically take care of themselves. Let's prove it. I need a call. Let's go for the 3rd row. Close enough. Head square through. Okay. Another call. Again, we're only working in the center. California twirl. Another call. Box the gnat. We're still sticking to the list. I've got it memorized, so that's easy. and don't feel embarrassed to call one off the list. I'll just say tilt. Pass. Was that a pass the ocean or pass through? Pass. I had one of each. I'm going to do a pass through. Another call. Again, I'm only working, or we're still with restrictions to the centers. Partner trade. Okay, we've stuck to the list so far. Let's work on getting this guy back to his spot in normal couples and 8-chain through setup. He's not facing the correct direction. These are arms. You turn back or turn through. Okay. So again, this is the number 4 couple. This is number 2. This is the number 3 man. And in this case, this is the number 1 woman because we stuck to the list. Okay? It works out. If you stick to that list, these women will take care of themselves. Let's go back and square your sets. This is probably number 3, sure enough. Still a lot of restrictions, aren't there? Okay, it turns out, let's jump at the next step. If I were to use a call that's not on that list, both columns, yeah, just different programs. If I were to use a call that's not on that list, ladies chain, these women are going to go across here. And do that same sequence or something similar, just sticking to the list. When I got here, I've got the wrong woman. It's pretty obvious, I hope. One way I could make sure I could get that ladies chain, the effect of that ladies chain canceled, is by doing another ladies chain. And then it would work. I could take another call, that does the same kind of a thing. Let's do, heads right and left through, which is an O. If I did a flutter wheel, that's not on the list. Therefore, if I did a pair off, I'd have the wrong woman. But if I do another flutter wheel, I could cancel the effect of the first one with the second one. And now, if I did a star through, pass through, I could get there. Question? Yep. Nope. Trust me that it's an O. I don't know quite quite how to set it up without getting some X's before and after yet. Let me say, by the way, when you have questions, ask them, and I'm going to start with one of three answers. I'll either answer your question, I'll say I don't know the answer, or I'll say, let me put that off a little bit because it'll make more sense later and fit into the scheme. This one I want to put off. The question was, walk and dodge is on the O list. Show me how you use it. And I can't at this point. Well, actually I can. Because I can do, are we squared? Is it number one? No, it's not. Oh, I'm sorry. It still is. Okay. Number one's up here. If I do men walk, ladies dodge, and it doesn't matter which walk and dodge, that is an O. So I'm still okay. And if I do a normal box walk and dodge at this point, I'm still okay. And if I do a partner trade and roll, I'm still okay, and a pass through is going to get me the number one lady over here. You're right. You're right. So I still wasn't able to set one up without going into an X, but let me put that off for a while then, because that didn't prove my point. You're right. Okay, we showed that if I do an X, and the calls that are not on this list are called X calls, and the XO terminology, O is sort of like zero. It's not that it's a zero call, but it has zero effect on what's happening here. The X calls tend to exchange partners. The terminology from J. King used was ladies chain effect type of calls. The terminology of X's and O's I got from Ron Schneider, who used the O effect or zero effect on this and exchanging partner kind of thing. We showed that if we use an X type of call and cancel it immediately with the same call, it's fairly obvious that it does cancel. It turns out that if I use an X type of call and cancel it with the same call but not immediately, it also has that effect. These are correct. Good. I'm going to do a ladies chain. Turns out that the number one man just received the number three as his temporary partner. I'm going to do a star through, and now I'm going to do another ladies chain in a totally different formation. Number one man still receiving the number three as his partner, coincidentally, but that canceled the effect of the previous one. If I do a California twirl, he's on his Alaman spot, and his number one partner's over here. So I can cancel the effect anytime I want with the same call or with any other X-type call. I could cancel a ladies chain with a flutter wheel. I could cancel a flutter wheel with a recycle, etc. Let's do some sequences that use that. Let's do a pass the ocean, which is an O. Let's do a single hinge, which is an X. So we have an X that I have to cancel. Let's do a walk and dodge, which is an O. Let's do a partner trade. So I still have an uncanceled X. Going to do a reverse flutter. That cancels the X. Left square through four hands. So I have my left hand free. Supposedly I should be able to do an Alaman left now. This should be the number one lady. Number 3 and 3. So I can use any number of X's I want as long as I cancel them with any other X. It doesn't matter how many X's. It doesn't matter which X I cancel it with. What it does matter is that I cancel it in this location that I'm working in the middle. That will make more sense in a moment or two. Let's walk through one more sequence that you guys create. Row 4. Somebody out there give me a call. Head slide through. And you don't have to worry about whether they're X's or O's. I'll let you know. Pass through. Swing through. I don't want to do a swing through because I still want to work with those in the center. Chase right. Chase right is an X. Chase right is an X, so I have an uncanceled X. Walk and dodge. I still have an uncanceled X. Somebody else. Partner trade. I still have an uncanceled X, so you have to cancel it. Ladies chain I'm not going to want to do very comfortably from here because, as you see, they're not holding hands, they're half sashayed, and I'm not crazy about having the men do a ladies chain. Excuse me? Veer left. Okay. Let me do a bend the line. That happens to be an X, and that'll get us out to cancel the X quickly. And then I'm going to do a star through, slide through, whatever. He's on his spot. Normal couples, 8-chain through setup. Number 4 couple, number 2, number 1, number 3. Still works. Question? You don't have to memorize the O's, you just have to memorize the X's. You can use as many O's as you want. It's the X's that have to flag a problem in your mind. And fortunately, if you look at the list, you'll see that there are probably twice as many O's as X's. The X's are on the next page. There are a lot fewer X's than there are O's. So it's a shorter list you've got to memorize. It's just one additional ingredient you have to learn about a call. You have to learn, it starts with facing couples. It has... there's a lot of things you have to learn, so this is one additional ingredient. And in general, there are a few exceptions, but in general, if a call is an X, it's always an X. Trade or run, whether it's men run, women run, cross run, centers, ands, it's still an X. So there are very few exceptions, and we will probably stumble across those to my embarrassment. Go ahead. Most of the X's and O calls have to do with 2-couple stuff, not 4-couple. There are other ways that we'll see how the 4-couple stuff ties in. Not all of it. That's some of the exceptions. Yes? I'd like to put that off. If we have time, I will talk with, help you. There are a very clear way to define what an X call is and what an O call is. It's not just random what I put on this list. Correct. Yeah. For the time being, just because of time constraints, we'll put it off. And if we don't have time here, I can talk with you or anyone else interested later. But there are clear rules. Okay, so we've done a lot of calling with the restrictions we have. And guess what? The sides are catching on to us. They say, I think there's something wrong with the system this guy's using. I'm getting bored sitting out here. Well, it turns out that you can always call to this guy and bring him to this spot, but that's not the solution we're going to work with right now. Let's do all that we've done and eventually bring this guy out to his Alaman spot or to a 0 box, and having canceled all the X's in the middle. Right now I can do a bunch of dancing. I call this the left side because that's where the active guy is. The people on the right side are going to be doing the same thing. I can do a bunch of 2-couple dancing over here, and as long as I cancel all the X's and bring this guy back to the inside spot, I'm still going to be able to make this thing work. Somebody give me a call. Swing through. Better do it correctly on the other side also. Another call. Oh, by the way, that's an X, so I have to keep track of that. Single hinge, we've canceled the X. Thank you. Another call. Split circulate, that's an X, so we have an uncanceled X at this point. Women run, that's canceling the X, that's cool. Let's start aiming for bringing this guy over to here and 8-chain through setup normal couples. Because the X's are canceled, you can still use some in the process. Give me another one. Past the ocean, let's stick off of A2 and past the ocean. Pass through face partner step to wave. All 8-fold. You mean single wheel? I don't know the call all 8-fold. That's a fudging extension I don't want to go with. Actually, it'd be easy because that'd get us there. Anybody else on a single hinge and roll is probably a nice way. That single hinge is an X. In this case, and roll is also an X, and that's one of the exceptions. Okay, we have a normal 8-chain through setup. This guy's standing on that spot. Hopefully this is the number 4 couple. Number 2, 3, and 1. We got a heck of a lot of choreography at this point. We've covered probably 85% of all the singing call figures that exist out there at this point. And you can ad-lib them. Not quite 75. I didn't throw a Ferris wheel in. Question? Okay, that's beautiful segue into the next segment, the next thing we're going to learn. So we've still got some clues. We've done some interesting stuff so far. There's another category of calls that I call across the center moves, where let's say we do a head square through, right and left through, I'm about to do a dive through, pass through. My active man is going across the center. Or if I do a pass to the center, pass through. Or if I do a veer to the left, couple circulate. There are a lot of moves, or pass through, trade by, that take somebody across the center. At this time, we're restricting ourselves to two things. Restrictions, one, we're pulling off the restrictions that nobody can go across the center. Two, we're laying on the restrictions that when somebody goes across the center, it can be only the active couples, not everybody. And an example of everybody is double pass through. But examples of just one couple, but not everybody, is couples circulate, dive through, pass through, trade by. If you were in waves, all 8 circulate is an example of just one couple going across and the other staying out here. So on the second page of your stuff in the lower right-hand corner, there's a cross-the-center type calls. See, pass through, trade by. Ferris wheel basically takes one couple into the middle and across the center. Dive through, pass through, all 8 circulate, couple circulate. 8 chain 2 will do it. And a few other things like that. But that basic ilk, and I think we're all pretty comfortable with what that is. The other thing is when we do that, at this point, I want to make sure that when somebody goes across the center, it's the active man. I don't want somebody going across the center, this guy's over here, does a couple circulate and still on this side. That's a restriction right now. Okay? But no, it's not an X-type call. It's basically an O. To get to your basic question, let's do some examples and show how we work with across-the-center stuff. Come on, guys, square your sets. So, we've done X's and canceled them in the middle. We've done X's on the left and canceled them there and brought the guy to the same spot. Flip over the identities. Now we're going to move somebody across the center and see what happens. Let's start with a heads square through, I don't know, right and left through past the ocean, extend. Let's get them to waves that way, what the heck. Swing through, men run. Yeah, thank you. Men run. Now we're going to do a couple circulate. There's a flag goes off in my mind. Somebody's going across the center. Is it the active man? Yeah, so I'm still fine. Chain down the line. Now, in order to resolve, I've still got to bring this guy back over to the spot he was on a chain 3 setup. So I can do some dancing over here, make sure I cancel all the X's, and then do a pass-through trade by to bring him over here. No, it's an O. From left-handed waves, it's an X, but from two-face lines, it's an O. Okay. What was that question here? No. A chain down the line is, a lady's chain is an X. A chain down the line from two-face lines is an O. Chain down the line is one of those exceptions because from a left-handed wave, it's an X. But typically a two-face line, it's an O. So I have done an O here. Yeah. As I say, all I'm going to do is try, and you can confirm that I have that on the list, so it will be whenever you try it. But what I've told you is we don't have enough time to teach you how to use it, just to prove to you show you the path that does exist if you did want to go back and learn it. And hopefully you will, because I think it's a neat tool. Okay, we're going to get them back quickly. Let's just do a half square through trade by. So, square through 1, square through 2. Trade by. Somebody's going across the center. It's my active man, so I'm okay. And I could have done a bunch of X's there and canceled them. We chose not to. We're in a chain through setup. Normal couples. Active man is on the spot. This should be the number 4 couple. This should be the number 1 woman, etc. So we've just expanded our choreography a whole bunch more. Now that we can go back and forth across the square, have the sides do it. We're about to take a bigger leap of faith. Any questions at this point that I can put off till later? Okay. This is where I think it gets really exciting myself. Let's see what happens here. We found that whenever we do an X, we have to cancel it. Let's try something else. We're going to do a head square through. Right and left through. Veer to the left. I'm going to do a ladies' trade right here. That's an X. So I have an uncanceled X. Now I'm going to do a couple circulate. I didn't cancel the X over here. I'm going to do a couple circulate. Somebody's going to cross the center. It's my active man. That's cool. And what I'm going to do is cancel the X over here instead. I'm going to cancel it here. So we've sort of worked up this gut feel that I really have to cancel X's before I call my L man left. I'm going to cancel the X here. The difference is instead of doing it in the same location, left, middle, or right, I started it on the left. I'm canceling it on the right. Bend the line from a two-faced line, by the way, is an X. Okay. Let's do a star through. And now, the first instinct would be I got to bring the guy back to this spot. Pass through trade by. Let's do a little bit of sight calling at this point, just to see what really the status is at this point. Let's flip over the identities of these people. And I can see if I did a pass-through trade by that this guy's corner would be over here. That's not going to work. If I look a little further, what do I see right now? I can do an L man left right now. I'm in a zero box. The active man is on the outside instead of the inside. But everybody's still facing corners, men and women in sequence, partners in your corners. What have I done? I did an X on the left, canceled it with another X, but canceled it with an X on the right, and that moved my spot from here to here. I could have done any dancing I wanted, but then bring to the guy to this spot and call an L man left. And boy, is that going to feel different to the dancers when you're actively trying to move somebody to the outside instead of dive through, square through, 3/4 to the inside kind of thing. Let's dance one of those and see what happens, knowing what we're aiming at this point. Remake the square, flip over the identities. Okay, so the pattern we're going to do this time is going to dance them. X is canceled in the middle. Bring them out to the left. Leave an uncanceled X here. Bring it over to the right. Cancel the X over here, and any other X's we do, cancel those, and eventually bring them to this outside spot on the far right. Instead of this spot here, I'm working towards this spot here. I'm moving the spot over to here. Somebody give me a call. Square through 4. That works. Let's do something that leaves an X here and gets the guy going across the other side. I heard a touch a quarter. That was sort of not the first one, not the last one. We're going to go with that. That's the X we want over here. Now we want to... I can't do a pass-through because they're in an ocean wave. Well, I could, but... Let's do a split circulate. Split circulate is an X. but we want to cancel that new X with an then run. So we still have an uncanceled X on this side. Now I want to get the active guy over this side. I'm going to pick square through 4 and trade by. Let's do that. Square through 4, trade by. So we've left an uncanceled X on the left side. We brought the guy to the right. Now we got to do an X over here. Let's do a right and left through, which is not an X, but it'll keep us dancing. Actually, let's just, for the heck of it, take a look. We've got an 8 chain through set up. We've got the guy on his spot, but we haven't canceled it with an X here. Let's prove that we don't have an 8 chain through a 0 box. Okay, let's just take a look. We normally don't cheat in the middle, but let's confirm. This is supposed to be the number 1 woman if it were, but it's theoretically not. It's number 4, etc., so we don't have to go any further than that. We do have to cancel the X here before this is going to work. So, heard a lady's chain. That's going to prove the point. And now to bring him to an 8 chain through with the number 1 man on the outside, boom, we did it. Okay, so theoretically, we should be able to do an L-man left right now. This should be number 4, 4, 3, 3, 2, 2, 1. You got a lot of choreography there, guys. If you got a grasp on it, and it's all ad lib. There's a lot of restrictions we pulled off already. There's a lot more to go. How we doing? We got about 20 minutes. Yes. Yep. Oh, I was just kidding, saying how do we work the sides? Well, we just do that way. But now we're working the sides by actually involving them actively. I was just kidding that we could work the sides by making them the actives in the middle. Yes? Yep. From here, actually it's 2 positions. Eventually we're going to see one in here, but moves it from here to here, right. Let me generalize a bunch without showing examples now. If I had already moved the spot over to here, and then I went back and did an X here and an X here again, it would move the spot back to here. If I were to start out by doing an X on the right and then on the left, it would have the same effect. It would either move the spot from here to here or from here to here. There's a lot more choreography, about 4 times what you just had. So an X on one side and then the other, in either order, will move the spot from here to here or from here to here, depending on where you've got it. And I'm jumping quickly because there's some generalizations I want to get to at the end before we run out of time. If I bring the guy over here, heads half square through, do an X here, I'll 8 circulate, bring him here, do an X here, it's still going to move this spot to here. I got to bring him over to this side to dance him to that spot. Yeah. Cancel it over here. That still moves the spot here. Now I have to bring him over to the spot to get the element left. Let me take the next step. Yep. Good question. How do you keep track of the X's was the question, because you've got an awful lot of other stuff going on. This is assuming you've memorized which ones are X's. How do you remember which ones you've done or not? The simplest thing to do initially when you're learning the system is, as soon as you do an X, cancel it, so that most of the time you're in an all X's are canceled state. And as you get a little better, you stretch out the time in between. You know, you don't just sort of randomly call and see when you called an X and didn't and try and keep track of it. You sort of plan, I'm going to move the spot over here for variety, so I'm going to do an X over here, bring them over here, cancel it pretty quickly, know my spot's here. And then I can do just typical dancing and know that eventually I got to get over here. The beauty of this is that your spots don't move very often. And you don't have to keep track of where this goes or that or that. There's either two states. Either you've got an X that's uncanceled or they're all canceled, no matter which calls you use. Now, as an aide, one of the students I was teaching many years ago said, I figured out how to help me do just what you're saying, keep track of where the X's are canceled. Every time I call an X, I put my hand up. Every time I call another X, I take my hand down. And when my hand is down and I'm in a relaxed state, I can call Alman left. My hand's up, I know there's a problem. I can't call Alman left. And I said, Peter, what do your dancers think? He says, I do this in the mirror downstairs when there's nobody there, but it's a way to help me practice. But with that in mind, I extended it to, and he agreed to this, that I cross fingers and uncross them. I cause an X with my finger or not. And sometimes you see me like this, you'll know that there's an uncanceled X. It's okay, I can call on my left. Everything's in a relaxed state. There's an uncanceled X, or I'm hoping it'll work. So that's another aid that you can use, is some kind of a physical thing that is not a mental thing. So you can keep the mental for the dancing that you're working with, but cross fingers, uncross them, cross them, uncross them. And you can do that fairly inconspicuously, especially while you're learning. Be careful of the hand up and down, especially while you're driving, if you don't have a convertible. Let me jump on to the next phase, because I think this is a neat step like this past one. It's related to it. What I'm going to do now is an X in the middle and cancel it on the left. So far we've canceled it in the same location, left, middle, and right. We've canceled it in two different locations, either left and right or right and left. Now we're going to do an X in the middle and cancel it on the left. Okay? Heads past the ocean. Recycle, there's my X. Pass through, I've moved out to the outside. Swing through. There's my X canceling it on the left. Who knows what we've done? Men run. There's an X that I want to cancel now. Bend the line from a two-face line as an X, so I've canceled that X. So I have my basic first X in the middle, another one on the right, and then the extraneous ones I've canceled. Let's do a star through to bring them to an A-chain through setup. And again, I haven't figured out the right way to ease into this so it'll appear black magic. I'm just going to take you there. Let's do a pass through. And it turns out, let me flip people over here, that this guy is standing next to his corner, back to back with his partner. We're in a trade-by formation that people very frequently use from a 1P, 2P, star through, square through, three quarters. This is where you would end up. So I could do an element, it's arms, not arrows. I was very stubborn about these symbols for a long time. Anything I do now, instead of having an arrow for the men, I have a square box, so it's not quite as hard to picture. But I'm still stubborn about it. I like the arms. So I can do an Alaman left from here. What's different? First of all, this is not an 8-chain through setup, either the spot here or here, but it's a trade-by formation. So we've added a whole pile of new choreography of the feel of a trade-by formation Alaman left instead of an 8-chain through Alaman left. And what I'm doing is I'm saying you've got to dance. Let me move these guys out of the way for a minute. But I have a grid like this that's either 8-chain through or trade by. And originally I was dancing the guy to this spot facing this way. That's an arrow. Eventually I did some X's, canceled in different locations, and danced into this spot facing the same direction. Now I've done an X in the middle and on the left, and that moved the spot over to here, still facing the same direction. Whole bunch of new choreography. X in the middle, X on the right, on the left, and moves the spot one place to the left. I could also do an X, I'm jumping ahead because of time, an X in the middle, cancel it on the right, and that would move the spot to here. Again, facing that way, a trade-by formation. Heads past the ocean, ladies trade, it's an X. Extend. Recycle, I've done an X on the right. Pass through to a trade-by formation, Alaman left. I've got 4 different Alaman spots. 2 of them are 8 chain through, 2 of them are trade by. Let me do a big jump in faith right here. I said when I did an X in the middle and on the left, it moved the spot 1 place to the left. If the spot had been here, it would have moved it 1 spot to the left here. If it had been here, it would have moved it 1 spot to the left here. Here, it would have moved it actually 1 spot to the virtual left over here. Whenever I do X's in 2 adjacent spots, left and then, right and then middle, middle and then left, the sequence is going from towards the left, the spot moves to the left. If I do the sequence to the right, left and then middle, middle and then right, the spot moves to the right. I could move this spot to here, this to here, this to here. There's a lot of flexibility and versatility. That's also a big step. You may not all be absorbing it at this point. There are ways to extend this so the spots are up here, or here, or here. We're not going to get into that. We don't have the time. Let me tell you a few things about interesting stuff with this at this point. This is hopefully shows you that you can do some ad-libbing, a whole pile. Do a lot of stuff without having memorized it. Resolve the square whenever you're ready. 3/4 of your squares break down. Cancel any remaining X's and dance the guy to the spot pretty quickly. And I'm not worried about whether my key square broke down because I don't have a key square. I can resolve quickly. Or spread it out if I want. We're back. Let's take a look at where we are. This was that last Alaman left we were in with the X in the middle and the X on the left. Let's have everybody do a quarter in. We have 0 lines, 1P, 2P lines. This is related to the calling you guys know. What's a typical get out from 1P, 2P lines? Star through, square through, 3/4. Star through, square through, 3/4. Lo and behold, it puts him on his spot facing that way and there are no X's in the call. It's very related to that. And it turns out that let's say you wanted to combine 2 methods. You have a module that gets you to a 0 line. When you're in a 0 line, you can mentally focus on the guy on the end of the line and say, I know now I can do some mental image calling to resolve to get him to this spot in a trade by. I can do an Alaman left. I can do heads, everybody promenade with partners in sequence. Call heads wheel around. I'm effectively in a 0 line. I can focus on the guy on the end and know I want to take him to that spot. So I can do some mental image calling from there and get him back to corners without moving spots. If I have a 0 box and I want to convert it to a 0 line, and I'm looking for an interesting module maybe that uses a particular call, 0 box, I got to go back into the center and do an X in the middle, come out here, do an X on the left, and then form lines and have this guy in the spot that's facing the center. I've got a 0 line. I've created my conversion module. 0 line to 0 box. Do an X here, do an X here, moves the spot 1 place, go to an 8 chain through setup. Pretty easy, convenient ad-lib as you're going. Let me point out a few other interesting things. I never once mentioned sequence. Men in sequence, women in sequence, square in sequence. We know that everybody has to be in sequence to resolve your square, but I don't have to follow that. It all takes care of itself. These all worked out. But if I were working with another caller and he says, but how do I know you're in sequence at this point? Or am I in sequence or am I not? Or you're teaching other callers and somebody wants to know. It turns out, really neat, that if your spot is any one of these down here that we've looked at, and your active man is the same side of this east-west line here as the spot, the square is in sequence, or at least the men are in sequence. And if the man is on the other side of that, the square is out of sequence. Doesn't matter which way it's facing, the square is out of sequence. The men are out of sequence. Take time to prove it to yourselves later, but it turns out that, interestingly enough, a call right and left through changes sequence. If we're in lines of 4, it moves the guy from one side of the line to the other. If you're an 8 chain through, it moves the guy from one side of the line to the other. The call star through, on the other hand, sometimes changes sequence and sometimes doesn't. So people who use sequence changers have to memorize really exceptions. For instance, here a star through doesn't change sequence. Here it does, because it moves them to the other side of the line. If perchance the spots were up here, because we've done some magic to do that, again, if the active guy is on the same side of the line as the spot, or above it, you're in sequence. Below, he'd be out. So that is an interesting thing to note. I don't know how useful, but it's interesting. This is something I find very valuable. I guess Kip Garvey did or is doing a session on knowing how and when you can use technical zeros. Most people know that true zeros you can use anytime and there's no problem. Technical zeros, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, but I'm not sure when which is, so it's better to shy away from them so I don't get myself into trouble. It turns out, when you know the mental image system, if all x's are canceled, a technical zero will work. If there's an uncanceled x, a technical zero will not work. Simple. I can have, let's say, parallel waves kind of thing, and I do, everybody's in sequence, all x's are canceled, and I do spin chain the gears, which is a technical zero. Turns out my active man ends up going someplace else. But there's a new guy down on this point. I can just assume he's my active man. I've just thrown in a zero. And still have to just recycle, sweep a quarter, X, cancel it, slide through, and he's on his spot. There is a very unique category of technical zeros that only work if you have an uncanceled X before them and cancel the X after it. All A circulate is one of those. Ping pong circulate is one of those. And the way I use ping pong circulate is I'll call, say, heads past the ocean, ladies trade. So I've got an uncanceled X in the middle. Ping pong circulate, I'm focusing on the new guy on the end of the wave. Recycle, I've canceled that X that I did before the ping pong circulate. Pass through, Allen man left, he's on his spot. You got to watch out in singing calls, it might cause some rotation of the whole square so that people don't promenade home the full direction. But let me see, any other cute little things that are worthwhile doing? Yeah, a couple. They're still handy to know. Let me see if I can get these guys back home. Not handy to know, but incentive for you to maybe want to go back and spend some time learning this. If I'm set up to do an element out on the side like I was from zero lines, and everybody quarter out to make trade by setup, I can just as easily dance to grand right and lefts than Allen man lefts. Notice if everybody does a U-turn back, we can do a grand right and left from here. So all I have to do when I'm teaching this thing, when I'm calling it mentally, is say, dance this guy to this spot. And actually it works from a zero box too. Dance him to the spot, but have everybody facing in the other direction, half-stash shade couples, that I can call a grand right and left. Here's from an 8 chain through a trade by. And here's a place I'll use that. I have this great grand right and left get out. I dance everybody to it, and 3/4 of my floor fell down, and I don't want to lose my punchline. I'll do a turn through to get everybody facing the other way, do a trade by Allen man left, and go back and nurse them into this position better so that I can have everybody appreciate the grand right and left get out instead of just a few. Another thing that, let's say you're doing a singing call and you want to add variety. Instead of having a corner progression, you want to have a right-hand lady progression. Or better yet, you're sharing the stage with somebody else and he did the right, and you're usually ad-lib your singing call pattern, and he did the one that was written to it, and you're about halfway through yours, and my God, you remember that he did the original, and the original was a right-hand lady progression. To get a right-hand lady progression, if your spot is here, normal zero box position, you just have to dance the guy to this spot here, twice removed, and that'll give you the right-hand lady progression. If your spot's here, you dance him to here. If your spot's here, dance it here. Dance the spot 2 positions away and swing your corner. It won't be the corner, it'll be the right-hand lady. Pretty simple to do on the fly if you have to. Okay, I'm going to do no X's. I want a right-hand lady progression. I do heads half square through, right and left through. Do-si-do 7 times to kill the rest of the 64, the thing, and swing your corner and promenade, and this will be the right-hand lady. I'm just going to dance them to this spot over here instead of this one. And it turns out it's your right-hand lady progression. 2 spots away in case you're being really fancy and having moved spots and all that other stuff. And there's lots more restrictions you can pull off. Not all of them, but lots more. We're running out of time quickly, like about a minute ago. Are there any questions at this point? We still had an outstanding one about how do I define... Let me... Whoops, stepped on. By the way, I'd like to thank Supreme Audio for the use of the wireless mic that I didn't need hands on. CALLERLAB provided me with one of the others, but I definitely need both hands to work these dancers, so it was nice of them to give me one. If you do want to learn where you can learn more of this, I'm not supposed to do any advertising here, but I have written a book that I published about 12, 13 years ago that does describe the thing step by step and going a lot further than we have here. You can get them from me. Supreme Audio also carries them. Question? Fish, fudge, pray a little. One of the chapters in my book was another version that's a little bit more scientific than that. It's when in trouble, do it double. Typically, when you've called a little sequence over here on the side, your short-term memory can pull it out really quickly if you had to repeat it. You know, I did something, it started an 8-chain through setup, brought back to an 8-chain through setup, and all of a sudden I couldn't remember whether I'd canceled all my X's or not. Do that same sequence again. If the X's were not canceled, doing it again will cancel it. If the X's were canceled, they're still canceled at the end of it. When in trouble, do it double. That's something that'll save you on occasion. And there's lots of tricks like that can happen. But anyway, the title of the book is Out of Sight. And I'd like to all thank you for coming, for staying, for asking good questions, for helping. Thank you. If anybody's interested in a quick definition of how you define X's and such, in about 5 minutes we can reconvene on the side here and I can go through it quickly for you.